So before I get into whether Covid-19 is a false flag or not, I just need to set the record straight about what a false flag actually is, because it seems like there's a lot of people out there who don't really know what it is. Before we start, please batter that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and then click that little bell notification next to it so that you'll always know when I've uploaded a new video. So what is a false flag? There's a lot of people out there talking about false flags these days. And most people believe that it's when a government or an organisation or a state manipulate and create an event that's going to horrify and scare people, and they're directly involved in that event with the end goal or the end game of achieving something, of passing a law or doing something that they wouldn't otherwise get support for unless something spectacularly terrible or horrific happens. So that's what the usual understanding of a false flag is. Now, it's close but no cigar. It's not exactly what a false flag is. You see, the states and the governments, although they encourage the event or manipulate things around the event, they don't actually engage in the event itself directly, because that'd be too obvious. But the idea is that they want to scare people to get the support that they need to pass a law or whatever else. The objective is the same. It's just that it's cleverer, it's simpler than having to actually organise something yourself. So normally what happens is the government or state know that the public won't support the action that they're about to take. So they need something to put fear into or anger into the public, instill that feeling, that sentiment where the people will say, yeah, okay, let's do it then. Let's whatever you want to do, let's do it. Whatever you government overlords want to do, let's do it. And so the government sets about, or the state, or even an organisation or a corporation, they'll create a situation or a scenario where an attacker or a threat has access to potentially, or access or an opportunity to potentially do something bad, something horrific, something terrible. And they create that scenario, and then they gently guide the threat towards their target, and they encourage it. So it's not the false flag that people very often talk about, where the government is directly involved in an attack, or they actually organise the attack. That's not the definition of the false flag, or if it is currently, it shouldn't be, because that's not how it goes down. If you look back historically at false flags, that's not what happens. And so I'm gonna eventually look at whether COVID-19 is a false flag, because there's a few alarm bells going off related to false flags. So going back to the scenario, you now have a threat. You've told people that they're a threat. You guide the threat towards their target, somewhere that they. So it may be that there's already a threat against the target that is going to be attacked. Maybe the state or the organisation have identified a threat whereby somebody has said in a communication, we're going to attack. There's a plan to attack, or there's a plan to do this, or there's a plan to do that. Maybe. Not always, but maybe. And then they just encourage it through. Now, the next stage of this false flag is remove the defence, remove the security, allow them through. So if you look at a lot of these events, especially the ones that the conspiracy theorists online or the people who are looking online say are the genuine false flags, if you look at a lot of them, there's a question over the security surrounding that event. And so you've got a question. What happened to the defence or the security? Where are they? So the objective at this point of the scenario is to make the event, or to allow the event to happen naturally and have very little involvement. That's the real false flag. You allow things to happen naturally. If you have to be involved too much in it, then people will very quickly find the paper trail, or they'll find why or how it happened or who's involved. So you set up the scenario, you set up the situation, you stand back and you allow things to happen naturally. You just get everybody out of the way, and then you present the bait to the threat. That's it. So you give an opportunity for an attack, and you just take away all the defense. That's the false flag. That's the reality of what a false flag is. It's, if you remember, it's with George Bush going into slightly different, I think it was, going into Iraq, the Iraq War, and he created shock and awe. And so this was, for me, this was kind of an early. There had been false flags before, but this was the early signs that this was going to become more mainstream. This was going to be something that would be used regularly in the narrative by the state, by organisations, to create fear. But the shock and awe was there was two things to that. First of all, it was false, and so I guess you could call it a false flag at that time. Was weapons of mass destruction. That Iraq's got weapons of mass destruction. They're imminently going to use them on Western nations, and so that garnered support. And so the shock and awe element of that. So you always need shock and awe. You always need images that are shocking. At that stage, the shock and awe image was from Iraq, and I remember very clearly sitting in my living room. I can't remember what age I was, but I must have been early teens maybe. And I just remember watching the shock and awe campaign and just think, Jesus Christ, these kind of little mini mushroom clouds going up all over Baghdad with airstrikes, and it was shocking. Even then, I was like, why are they doing this? Like, why? It just seemed a bit weird. But so that's what it is. It's when Bush said there's weapons of mass destruction over in Iraq, so it creates, people think, God, Jesus Christ, that's scary. Because if they start attacking us, that's really scary. So that's the fear. And then the anger comes. Well, we've got to do something. Can't allow these people to do that. And those are the symptoms for what comes next. The diagnosis and then the symptoms of the fear and anger. And then in a false flag, there's very often in conspiracy theory circles, they talk about the mainstream media being complicit and being involved and setting up crisis actors and setting up the scene and something. Again, it's not as complex as that. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I'm saying that it's not as complex. It's a lot simpler. So the mainstream media, they're a tool to spread the message of fear and spread the message of, oh, we're under attack. That's what the mainstream media are there for, but not necessarily that they're involved. I mean, it's very, very easy for somebody who is involved in the false flag and setting up the situation and the opportunity for an event, for them to contact the mainstream media and release some information, some anonymous information that makes the media think that they're one step ahead and that this is an exclusive and everything else. So they run with it. When it's something shocking, they run with it. Especially if it's an event that seems crazier than real life, they'll run with it. That's all the media are used for. They're a pawn. It's not. I'm not saying that there's not events where the media fabricate something or are involved in something fabricated, but it's a lot simpler in that it's easy to give them a seed of information and say run with that information. Then they send their reporters. Then they go and check it out. Then when they get there, all hell's breaking loose, and so they get the exclusive shots and all of that. That's how the media is used. It's not. They're not part of always part of this machine. They're just used. and they enjoy being used. Their ratings go up because of that. So that's ultimately the role of the media in a false flag. People are too smart these days that if you were to directly orchestrate everything yourself and you're directly involved, it would soon come out how everything was put together and who was involved, and so that's not what happens here. It's more subtle. And so what's the reason behind a false flag? Most of you will already know, but the reason is to there's always an end game. There's always something at the end that people wouldn't normally agree to. But you tell them that they're under attack, and you tell them that this is the remedy. And so that's normally what it is. It's where, I mean, a lot of times it's to do with laws being passed. Laws being passed that are supposed to be because of this event, but that will remain long after the event's gone. Long after the event's finished, these laws remain and continue to be used to keep control of the population. So, kind of in summary about a false flag, what a false flag is, the events are real and they're horrific. There's an awful lot of people out there who say some of these events just don't happen, and it's a whole acted scene. And that's not, again, occasionally this may be the case, but my take on it is that normally it is a horrific scene. The more horrific, the better. The more real, the better. And that's what you've got to realise, that you can't fabricate reality. You've got to allow reality to take place. So the real outrage is that these events are encouraged and then allowed to happen by people in authority. That's the real outrage. So it made me think. So again, this is about COVID-19 being a potential false flag, but I just want to get into and give you a better idea of what makes a false flag. So you know what one is now. So how do you know if it's a false flag? Well, I've thought about that, and the conclusion that I've come to is that there's a recipe. There are things that you can identify in an event that will tell you if there's a higher probability of it being a false flag. Because there's a few things that just don't make sense when you watch an event. What are the things that make you say there's something not right here? How does it differ from a natural event, from something that happens? And normally you can connect the dots in a natural event. And it's the same as when a crime scene investigator goes and investigates the scene of a crime. When you get to the truth, everything makes sense. Nothing is out of place. And it's the same with a false flag. When you're watching it unfold, or you're a few days later or whatever, you're going back over the event. When you watch it unfold, there are things that don't make sense or are out of place. That's how you know that there's something wrong. So the recipe, the things that I look for, these characteristics, and you can check them off. So you can watch an event and check each one off, and then you know, okay, there's a higher probability. But if everything makes sense, everything makes sense. It makes sense. It's just happened. It's real. So kind of going to the end of the recipe, really, kind of the putting it in the oven, is the objective. There's always an objective, but it's not obvious when you're watching the event. It's only a bit later when politicians start to stand up and say, right, these are the measures that we're putting in place so that this doesn't happen again, or so that we can eradicate this threat. Once you start seeing that politicians start talking about that, then your suspicions should kind of bubble up to the surface, because then you start to say, well, if there's an objective to this, are people making money from it? Are the controls being put in place? But then, I guess the objective part of the recipe is not one of the major parts of the recipe, in that there's measures going to be put in place if it's a real event. So, The biggest one for me, the biggest red flag, the biggest part of a false flag that makes you say, what? Is when there's no defense or security. So when an event's about to happen, if you ever ask yourself, how was this allowed to happen? Then that's a red flag, in my opinion. How was this allowed to happen? Because we always seem to get events where it comes out later in the media or whatever, where it says the security forces knew about this person involved in the event or these people involved in the event. They got intelligence that this was going to happen. So why wasn't it stopped? So that's kind of the biggest one for me is where's the security? You watch an event sometimes recently, and I'm going to get into some events and I'm going to show you how the recipe applies. But you look at some of these things and you say, where are the security? Where's the security? Surely people knew this was happening. Where's the security? Like what? Where's it gone? This is bizarre. Where are the people stopping this from happening? Because I guarantee that if it's a real event, very quickly there's a response from some sort of security. If there's not, continue asking questions. The next part of the recipe that you pour into your mixing bowl for your false flag to identify if it's a potential false flag is exaggeration. So the exaggeration of the narrative from the politicians to create mass hysteria. Very often, again, and this is a modern phenomenon, is the politicians stand up or people in the media stand up or public figures stand up and talk about the event, but they discuss it in terms that, because they can't help themselves. If they know that event was going to occur and it happened, they can't help themselves but exaggerate because it's never enough. If they're creating an event, a false flag, to garner support for something, they need the support. They can't leave it to chance that people won't support it. So then you get exaggeration. You get people standing up and saying this was the most horrific thing to ever take place in the history of anything. It's this is horrific. And again, use your instincts. Use your own judgment, and you look at it and you say, that's not what I looked at. That's not what I saw. That's not what I'm experiencing. This is exaggerated. Why is it exaggerated? Why is your experience as a politician, yet another human being, so utterly different to my experience? Why are you seeing it completely different? Why are you seeing it so blown out of proportion? So the exaggeration's an important indicator. Again, tick. If you can do that, then that's another one. And then the third ingredient of the recipe is mistakes and errors. So in a lot of these false flags, you can go back and you can look and you see errors. And you see moments, you see things that don't make any sense at all, that flash up and you say, what? Like, that makes no sense. No sense at all. So it just makes no sense. And so if you're in the real world without having the media and politicians and other people kind of talking down to you, saying, if you don't believe what we're telling you, then you're a bad person. When you don't have that, if it's an event that happens normally, naturally, in real life, again, you don't. If you were to see, if somebody was to tell you a story, one of your neighbours told you a story about something, your bullshit meter would go off, and you go, hang on a second, this person's lying to me, or that part of your story just doesn't make sense. So therefore, the legitimacy of your entire story is diminished. But why when there's something that doesn't make sense in an event, are we told to discount. Oh no, it doesn't matter. No, it's something else. It's something else. Don't look that way. Don't look that way. You got a question. You got to start thinking about it. So those are your ingredients. Your ingredients are: you have an objective, you have errors, you have exaggeration. What was the other one? And you've got lack of defense or security, or somebody stopping it. And that's it. Those are the 4 ingredients in a false flag recipe these days. And it's so easy for these events to happen now. And it's very easy for whoever's orchestrating them, again, normally the state or an organisation, occasionally corporations, it's very easy for them to discredit the reality by highlighting crazy, wild conspiracy theories. So when people start to question it, it's very easy for them to say these people are crazy by exaggerating the conspiracy theories and bringing to the fore, for example, the wild false flag conspiracy theory, which is that it's organised and orchestrated and directly created by the state or by an outside actor or whatever. When it isn't, because it's too difficult to do. But it's easier to highlight those people. Or, for example, if you're questioning the Covid-19 narrative, whether it's wearing masks, whether it's now wearing 2 masks, 3 masks, which is the official guideline in the US, wear 2 masks. So when people question this, suddenly you're an anti-masker, shame. Like in the medieval times, walking them down the street, shame, throwing some tomatoes at them. You become shamed, and so it's very it's very easy because people latch onto that. They don't want to be the person walking down the street having tomatoes thrown at them, so they latch onto that. No, I'm following the rules, and those people are crazy. Those are crazy conspiracy theories. So among us, it's very easy now for the ruling class, the ruling elite, the whoever's in charge, to muddy the waters so that you can't question things and realise that there's an ulterior motive or there's an alternative truth to something. You can't do that anymore. Their idea is to muddy the waters, make people doubt each other, make you doubt your neighbours, make you call the police when they've got more than 1.5 people in the house, or whatever the stupid figure is. And that's where we're at now. That's where we're at in this story now. Is it's too easy for the state. Too many people believe what the state are saying, not directly. What the state are saying can be through anything. It can be through conspiracy theory forums and subreddits and groups on social media. They can plant people in and spread these stories about false flags being made up by the state and all. They can do that to make people doubt each other and to make people think that the other person's crazy. I'm not crazy, you're crazy. No, I'm not crazy, you're crazy. And then suddenly that everything's no longer clear. That's why it's important to go off your own experience. And so that's kind of where I've come to with COVID is I'd like people to just go off your experience. What's your experience? What's your experience? Like how many people do you know that's had it? How many people do you know that had symptoms? How many people do you know that were really ill with it? How many people do you know that died with it? How many people have you had it? What was your experience? How terrible was it? Go off your own experience. What's happening around you? Are you seeing hearses rolling down the street? Are you seeing people in hazmat suits breaking into people's houses and taking them out because they've got this deadly virus? Think about reality. Think about what's really going on around you. Because it's only when we strip away when we strip away the noise, the white noise, when we strip all of that away, and you just take what are you experiencing? What's your reality? Like my reality is I've got my own COVID reality, my own experiences, but then my reality also is I know I can look at mainstream media and I can know that they're lying, and I can see some of the lies, and so they're not to be trusted. That's my reality. If somebody real in my life comes and always tells me lies, then why would I keep believing what they're telling me to do? I don't get that. If somebody's good to me, great. If somebody's bad to me, okay, I'll deal with that. It's my experience. It's my life experience. I don't need other people to tell me what my experience is. Like I know, and you need to do the same. That's why it's important to follow the false. If you're looking for a false flag, is follow the false flag recipe that I've laid out with your own eyes and ears, and taking the information yourself. Question. If you're questioning what happened to, why didn't anybody stop this thing that happened? Why did they not stop it? Like, why are the politicians standing up? Why are the Congress people? Why are the MPs standing up and saying this is wildly horrific? It's like a good example. The people in the Congress people in the US at the moment calling Republicans who were in Donald Trump's cabinet as bad as Nazis, as bad as Nazis. Like those are the actual words they're using. So again, exaggeration beyond the reality of life. So you've got to make sure that you're using your own judgment, not just accepting what they're telling you. Because another thing that I've noticed in the media, and again, it's kind of a modern phenomenon, I think, is when I was young, news used to be like, good afternoon, this is the news at 10. Today, this happened. And yesterday, this happened. And today, this evening, this is going to happen. Right? That was the news. And that's what you do. You're reporting events. Now, the news is why Donald Trump isn't fit to be a human being anymore. This is why we believe that the Democrats should ascend to saint status. This is why we believe, and it's all about giving beliefs, but that's word of mouth. That's word of mouth recommendation. It's a way of coercing people. Because when people hear other people's opinions, they don't want to miss out on, or they don't want to be the pariah. They don't want to disagree on that opinion. Okay, so I accept masks will stop COVID. Fine. Okay, we believe that masks. This isn't. So we're going to show a scientist, and he's going to give his gospel opinion. It's all about opinions now. It's not about the actual just reporting the event. COVID, this happened. This many people died. This many people got admitted. This many people. Now it's standing up a politician or a health advisor, and then having them waffle on about their beliefs of the best way forward. That's what it is these days. So always use your own judgment, please. And there's always been false flags. I say there's always been. It's a relatively modern phenomenon, but it's been going on for a while. And so I just wanted to go through a few false flags and just apply the recipe to them. So the first one was, I don't know if you know the story of Pearl Harbor, the Pearl Harbor false flag, but just before the United States entered the Second World War, Pearl Harbor was obviously attacked by the Japanese. And at that time, the Japanese were kind of a dictatorship. They were expanding their territories, apparently. And so there was an attack on Pearl Harbor, and it was horrific. Lots of people, of soldiers died. Lots of people died. And fine. So then the US goes and flies over to Japan, drops the nuclear bomb, and it kind of pretty much ends the war because it terrified everybody and destroyed. I mean, the amount of people killed by the atom bomb that was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was just horrendous. And just imagine the suffering of civilians. Imagine just civilians. Dropped on a city. Think about that for a moment. How horrendous that is. So when you start to apply the recipe to it, which I will do in a second, I'm just going to read. This is from Yesterday, which is a UK TV channel, and they did a documentary. I think it was called "Did the US Let Pearl Harbor Happen?" So that's that goes neatly into what I say about a false flag and how these events are allowed to happen rather than orchestrated. So the kind of the premise of it was that the president of the US, Roosevelt, at the time, knew that there was an attack being planned and on Pearl Harbor, and there was people who were notified that there was going to be an attack. And it says here, early in 1941, in an episode straight out of something from spy fiction, a US embassy staffer in Tokyo was standing in line at a bank when he was approached by the Peruvian envoy to Japan, who told him he had it on good authority an attack on Pearl Harbor was being planned. The staffer passed the warning on to the superiors at the US, and later a spy codenamed Tricycle also passed on information about an attack on Pearl Harbor. So they knew that there was planning going on. Even more damning is a written account by Henry L. Stimson, the US Secretary of War, who described how Roosevelt pondered how we should maneuver the Japanese into the position of firing the first shot without allowing too much danger to ourselves. And in quotes it says, "If by these means Japan could be led to commit an overt act of war, so much the better." So these are actual accounts. So number one on my recipe, where was the defence? Where was the security? They knew it was coming. So why didn't they stop it? The reason is because they wanted in. They wanted into the war. It would be an excuse to enter the war. It would be an excuse to attack Japan, who was an enemy at the time, and expanding their territories and everything else. And it was an excuse to test out a new super weapon on innocent civilians. The exaggeration part is kind of exaggeration's a new phenomenon almost, because the events aren't as horrific as they used to be. Then it was still shock and awe. So it was still horrific. We commit a horrific atrocity, and that's enough to garner support from the public to go and do our own atrocity. So at that kind of in those years, it was shock and awe, and then it was getting the support from the public. And but again, the major red flag for me is, where's the defence? They knew it was coming. Why was there no interception? Because it wouldn't have served the purpose. 9/11 was another event that people call a false flag. But again, it's painted as a super conspiracy theory, where people are saying that it was directly done and directly orchestrated by the state and everything else, which seems super horrific, tremendously terrible, with so many lives lost. But again, like I've said to you before, you apply each of the elements of the recipe. So you go to the end of the recipe first. What was the objective? What would the objective of such an attack be? Well, now you can go and drone strike. You can go and attack. You can go and attack in the Middle East. So again, it's military gain, military economics. It's financial gain from the oil fields in the Middle East. That was the end. That was the end objective of it. So there's your objective. And now, with 9/11, where was the security? Where was the defence? This is an incredible one. Is that if ever planes deviate from their course, they're asked why, and then if not, if they don't respond or they respond with hostility, then jets are scrambled to go and intercept and find out what's going on and either take them, guide them away, or help them, or take them out. So why didn't this happen on 9/11? And the reason was because the Air Force that would have been directly involved in defending New York had been directed away. I believe it was somewhere up near Canada to do exercises, to do practice exercises for an event. So they'd been directed away for that day. They were too far away to respond. So again, the question is something isn't right. The defense forces weren't there to defend in that specific moment that there was an attack. Once the attack happened on the planes, once the planes were taken over, there would have been Mayday signals sent out. We've been hijacked. It's just, again, the defense. Where is it? The exaggeration part comes again at this stage in our time, in our history. It was a shock and awe, but there's only so many shock and awes that you can do. Previously, in the scheme of history, the timeline, each event was so far apart from the other one that people would forget about the event. So you forget about it affects everybody. They get what they want from it. The elite get what they want from it. People forget about it. A few generations pass. Another one. Shock and awe. Oh, that's horrific. It gets support again. The problem is now is that they're greedy now. They're greedy. They want more. So they know that they can't go shock and awe, shock and awe, shock and awe every year, because people are going to go, hang on a second. Why aren't you protecting us? Like, I saw that last one and I was horrified. But why aren't you protecting us on this one? So now they need exaggeration. They need more stuff now. However, in 9/11, it was certainly shock and awe. It was a horrific event, one of the worst events I've ever seen, and something, I don't know. It was horrendous, really bad. But then so there's always errors that happen, and it makes you scratch your head and you say, why did that happen? So, for example, Building 7, which was another smaller kind of building, skyscraper, office block, I don't know what you describe it as, that collapsed. And the same as the other two buildings. And nothing happened to that building. So why did that building collapse? Again, it's a head-scratching moment. You go, that's weird. That's really, really weird. And then there was reports again. Like I haven't gone that deep into into the conspiracy theories around it, because for me it's noise. You just look at what you've seen. What I saw when that building came down and it's not been touched by anything is odd. So, but the other theory is that there were news channels reporting that building had gone down when it hadn't, and then it went down after, which would suggest to me that it falls within the brackets of a potential false flag. Because maybe somebody's passed that information. Oh, Building 7's gone down. It hasn't yet gone down. So, yeah. I mean, 9/11 potential. Again, I'm not saying any of these are definitely. I'm just saying, like, when things don't add up, things don't add up. That's all there is. And the next one is the recent Capitol Hill, which is a really interesting one. The Capitol Hill attack. Because if you don't listen to anything else and you sit down and you watch the footage and you go, right, you've got a load of protesters and they weren't really being in the footage, they weren't really being like super violent. I've seen way more violent protests than that. Way more. They weren't throwing anything. They didn't have any kind of weapons. They weren't. When people want to protest, you have a look at some of the protests in other countries. When people want to protest and smash things up, they do it. And they get violent. And they just weren't. There was a lot of shouting, there was a lot of chanting, there was a lot of waving, there was a lot of all of this sort of stuff. And at no point do you go, holy Jesus Christ. Like, I remember watching during the Arab Spring, which, I can't remember which country it was in. I want to say it was in Iran, but it may have been Egypt. So where there was a woman and she was shot in the chest and she falls back and her eyes roll in her head and then blood just runs down her mouth. And that's the reality. That's the reality of violent riots and protests. There was when I was in Colombia, I was watching. There was an attempted coup in Ecuador while I was in Colombia, and I was fascinated watching that on the TV through the night. There were people attempting to take the government, but these were protesters attempting to do it, and they were holding like shields and crouching down on the floor and like advancing and these things were getting hit by bullets and they were that's real. That's real violent uprising. What I saw in the Capitol Hill example wasn't. So then let's apply the recipe. Defense, security, where was it? You're telling me at the Capitol Hill, there were no special forces. There's no special forces stationed there. You're telling me there's no special forces stationed at Capitol Hill all the time? So again, this doesn't add up because you for me, there's two questions. There's two possibilities. Either they were removed and this was allowed to happen, or the US is one of the most incompetent nations on the planet for defense and for defending their capital. It's not the second one. For me, the answer is the first one. They were told to stand down, stand back, step back, allow this to happen. And then on top of that, the security forces were told to open the gates. They opened. Why did they open the gates? Like, tell me, why did they open the gates? Why did they open the door? Why? That part makes zero sense. You're a security official on the inside of a fence or a gate or whatever, and the protesters are outside. They can be as rabid as they want. If they're outside, you just stand there. You don't do anything. Let them go wild. Why were those doors and gates open? Then when they get to the front, the doors are open and they're allowed in. So again, it doesn't make sense. And that was one of the errors for me. So again, from the recipe, the errors, when you see that they're opening, that's an error of the planning of the false flag. So the protests come. Maybe what was hoped was that the protesters would go up to the gates and break through the gates on their own, but the protesters didn't. So again, it goes against the narrative that they were violent animals that were there to destroy the Capitol. They weren't. They were there to protest. And so that was an error. So somebody gave orders, like go and open the gates, let them in, let them through, because the optics weren't there. This was just a peaceful protest at the Capitol. The optics that they wanted weren't there. So they opened, let them in. That's an error because we can spot that error. We can spot the mistake. The exaggeration now by politicians is baffling because it doesn't match what you see on the TV from the footage. Doesn't match what the politicians are saying. They're calling it an insurrection. They're calling it they're calling it all sorts of things. Like, so what they're saying is that this guy wearing this stupid hat with the horns, what he's gone and sat there and now he's the new president. So that's an insurrection. What are you talking about? This wasn't an insurrection. And so they're saying it was horrendous. I mean, Ocasio-Cortez saying that she was worried that she would be murdered when she wasn't even in the building. So she's been caught out lying about it. Makes you wonder. All the other people as well, the footage of the other people just relaxed. The other politicians just relaxed, walking around. A few video footage of them like hiding down underneath the chairs and whatever, but it just wasn't. It just doesn't add up, and so it's been way exaggerated. It's now been kind of the seriousness of it is being exaggerated using the words domestic terrorism. That wasn't domestic terrorism. It might have been terrifying for a few of the politicians, but I'm saying that's not a bad thing. What would be domestic terrorism would be attacks on other members of the public by a group or whatever else, but that's not what happened here. So it's not domestic terrorism. White supremacy. It wasn't just white. There weren't just white people in the march to the Capitol or inside the Capitol. It was, for me, it's just bizarre. The whole thing is bizarre. And so when you start to think to yourself, is it bizarre? Then like question. If it's a weird situation and it seems a bit implausible, then why is it not implausible? Why is it not impossible? It's weird. I mean, so then so what was the objective of this false flag? In my opinion, well, it's not an opinion. They're now talking about bringing in domestic terror laws. So again, are these domestic terror laws now going to enable them or allow them to now kind of I don't know if they could subpoena some of the social media companies to hand over their information or their backdoors to some of the apps. So WhatsApp and is Twitter and private messages and this and this and this. Is that what it's going to allow them to do? Because they've been dying to do that for a long time, to be able to just enter into people's social media without permission if they need to. Domestic terrorism. That person voted for Trump. We need to be able to see everything that they've got in their social media. It's a dangerous road, dangerous road. And another one is, I mean, if you just check out. I mean, I believe that it's because the elite, the ruling class, now know or now feel that there is potential to be an uprising because the majority of the population know what they're up to, and I think it's about keeping control. Which you've got to question: why do they feel that way? Why do they feel threatened? If everything's above board, why do they feel threatened? And they've got all this support. Why do they feel threatened? You've only got to look at the cages that they've built around the Capitol now. That was supposed to be for Joe Biden's inauguration, which was 3 weeks ago now. Look, why are those cages still there? Why are the thousands and thousands of soldiers still there? Why? My thinking about it, again, my instinct is that they feel that there is justification for an uprising. So they're just putting all the controls in place to make sure it doesn't happen. And also potentially what's about to come with Covid-19, the measures that they're going to put in place. Because so the Capitol Hill was if it was a false flag, now they know that people know that they can get to the Capitol, or it will encourage people to go and get to the Capitol and try and do something similar. So that's why they've put these things up, because once the COVID measures become tougher and tougher and tougher forever, which I think will probably happen, these measures will just stay with us. We're never going back to the life we had before, never. So this should be a serious concern for everybody. If you're not concerned, why not? So, just like a final point on conspiracy theories is that the conspiracies get cloud with all of the, as a conspiracy theory gets crazier, and as people start to add pieces in, like, oh, the government were involved, oh, these were involved, they orchestrated, they did it, they invented it, they filmed it, they had crisis actors, they did this, they did that. It clouds the issue, and it delegitimizes the reality of what's going on. It makes it not as believable, and that's the problem. It's all of that is just noise. So going online, fine. If you see things that people have pointed out, then go and look at it and have a look at it and see what you think. But don't allow it to cloud your judgment. Just follow the recipe. That's all you need to do. So kind of moving on to COVID and the whole reason for this video was something about the COVID-19 pandemic feels off. Something doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel natural. And so there's probably people screaming now at the screen saying, nothing's right about this. It's all off. It's all wrong. I know. I get it. And no, I know that. But I'm just looking at it from the perspective of the false flag recipe and getting rid of all the noise. So if you remove all of the noise and you say, okay, I'm going to start with a blank slate and I'm going to look at it just with the recipe, and we'll judge kind of what the probability of it being a false flag is. So I just want to state that I'm not a conspiracy theorist in any sense of the kind of the mainstream media sense of the word or anything like that. But I'm a realist, and I'll look at things and I'll question things. I question everything. And once I've put the pieces together in my own mind, and I've seen the evidence, like, okay, so this is the probability. Even if I don't know, then in my mind I think then the probability is higher that this is the outcome. If I see something with my own eyes, then obviously it's 100% true. So I just want to, so pointing out, for me, it's a real virus. I'm not denying COVID-19 exists. COVID-19 is a virus that is deadly to a very small percentage. Is bad, not deadly, is bad to a very small percentage of the population, the global population, who already have underlying health issues. So it exists. I'm not denying it exists. So if we go to the recipe again, so you say, where was the defence? Why didn't we do anything? Why didn't the authorities do anything? Now, the authorities have known about the existence of these sorts of viruses for a very long time. SARS, MERS. They've known that these viruses exist. And they've known that COVID-19 specifically has existed for a long time. There were reports in Italy that COVID-19 was detected from samples of water in the sewers from well into 2019. So it was there from then. So it's interesting that the health figures weren't different. So they've known about this, and this takes me back to the head health advisor. I don't know who he is. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci in the US. He funded, and incidentally, he's the highest paid government official in the US, higher than the president, which is interesting, a bit strange. But so he funded in the US, he funded research into these sorts of coronavirus eye, and specifically the gain of function research, which is based around genetically modifying viruses to make them more efficient at passing from one species to another, which is always the issue. The issue for viruses is that they're specifically mutated to affect one species in a specific way. But gain of function was about making them more virulent, so they could go from one species to another. Not only that, was instead of infection happening through contact, it would happen through the air, through respiration. This makes it a lot more virulent, and then, as I said, to pass between animals and humans, or in between different animals. So he was funding these tests and these researches in the US. Then President Obama, because they realised how bad one of these viruses could be if it got out, he put a stop to it. So he stopped the funding for these research projects on coronaviruses, gain of function elements of it, and he stopped it because it's too dangerous. If one of these get out, we're screwed. So Fauci then turned his attention to the laboratory in Wuhan, the Wuhan Laboratory of Virology, Wuhan Center of Virology, something like that. And so he turned his attention and his funding so that they would continue to do the research on these gain of function viruses, gain of function elements. So and so, although the World Health Organization has said that it didn't come from that laboratory, there's a fairly good chance that it did. And if they've continued to make the virus more virulent, worse, more deadly, can pass between species, can pass much quicker from human to human, that's where it's come from. So if we go back to the recipe, where's the defense? We knew it was there. Why wasn't it stopped? So that's number one. Why was it allowed? We knew it was in Italy. We knew, why was it allowed to travel the world? Why was it, if it's that bad, why was it allowed? So that's my first red flag. Like, why was that allowed to happen if they knew it was there? It again doesn't make too much sense. And again, as a false flag, for me, that's an opportunity. The opportunity was presented to the threat. So it seems to me like you close down, you say, okay, we can't do this in the US because it's too dangerous. So what you do is you outsource it and you give it to somebody else who you think may have less stringent controls and security, and that's the opportunity. You give it to them, and you kind of allow nature to take its course. So again, the modern false flag is about allowing something to happen naturally. Go for your life. So then it was released, and we're in the situation we're in now with COVID. There's nothing we can do. We're in it. But look at the next one: exaggeration. How much are we getting battered daily with information about from celebrities, from politicians, from the mainstream media about the virus, and it's about how deadly it is and how terrible and how, but it's got a survival rate of more than 99% across the global population. When somebody gets this virus, you've got a 99 point something % chance of surviving. It might be pretty rough, but you survive. So exaggeration. There's a major exaggeration there. Really. And when I say exaggeration, I mean versus the measures. To lock down countries, to tell people they can't leave their house, to tell people they can't see people from other households, their family, their friends. They've got to wear 2 masks at all time. That doesn't match the exaggeration. That's exaggeration. That's not proportionate to the actual thing itself. I mean, Ebola is different. Ebola's different. So when there was the Ebola outbreak, that's different. And you noticed that there was I think it was a Scottish nurse who had Ebola. She came back. I can't remember if she caught it again. She had it twice, but I can't remember if she caught it again here or if she caught. But you saw the difference there, and again, the whole thing made sense to me. So when she caught Ebola again, there was hazmat overload, everything was covered and nothing was allowed to get out, and everybody wore, because the actual thing itself is horrific. That's more of that's similar to what the response is if we were having something that was like Ebola, where the survival rate's very low, the death rate's really high for Ebola. So that's the exaggeration is all around us. It's really, the exaggerations. It's just over the top. So again, not denying the virus, but just the exaggeration's just a bit much, isn't it? So that's kind of the second one. These are the two things so far that we've looked at, and it's like, it's a bit weird. Third one, errors. So again, errors being made. And one of the errors that I've seen that's just a joke, and again, doesn't fit anything, you can't brush it under the table, is the fact that we're being told that the flu virus has just disappeared. It hasn't. Let me tell you, overall deaths in the country in all countries are still exactly the same. They haven't increased at all. The flu virus has disappeared. We've never been able to get rid of the flu virus ever. So how has this happened? It's a coincidence. It's a mighty coincidence. If you think it's a mighty coincidence, I ain't got much hope for you, because flu down, a new virus has come. Come on. We're never getting rid of flu. And just to touch on that, actually, I saw recently that somebody was saying that they'd been to the doctors and they'd asked for a flu test, and the doctors had turned them down for a flu test. And then there was a lot of other people commenting saying, "Oh, I've done the same thing. They said that they don't have time to do it, and they can't, and all of their efforts are being put into COVID, and so like, oh, they haven't got time to do a flu test." And you're like, what? That's strange. Surely it's another virus. You've still got a test for it. Surely. So what's the end game for COVID? So the objective I'll get to in a sec, but there's with COVID again, take away all the crazy conspiracy theories, the crazy noise, take away all of that crazy, filter all of that out, just look at these elements that I've just spoken about, and you say, it doesn't make sense. Just using those, it doesn't make sense. And that's what a false flag is. A false flag is an event that just doesn't make sense to the normal person. And so what is the objective? The objective in this case is to tighten controls, to take away individual liberties, to not allow for people to rise up against what's coming. I think it's also been an excuse to make money. The fact that the measures are global is a problem for me. It means that there's something else coming where they want to prevent an uprising, or they want to prevent people from doing something, for changing the outcome. So the UK has announced over the last couple of days, it's announced for a while that it's thinking about bringing in COVID passports for you to travel, and they'll be ID passports. So to start off with, it'll be for travel. So you'll be able to show that you've been tested and everything else. But eventually, those will turn into passports to do other things, to go shopping, to go to a restaurant, to a pub, to a bar, to the cinema. You'll have to show that you've been tested. And so these, what my suspicion is that they want to turn these into social credit passports. So you have to comply with what's going on, otherwise your bank's frozen, or you can't go to a restaurant, or you can't go and do certain things until you've shown that you've done what they've asked you to do. I mean, the crazy news that's just come out, I think it was yesterday, is that people coming back from red listed countries. So the UK is now giving a list of, I think it's 30 countries that are on a red list. You come back from one of those countries and you don't comply with their measures that you need to quarantine for 10 days in a special quarantine hotel, which costs £1,750. If you don't do that, you could face 10 years jail time, which is more than sex offenders, more than some violent criminal crimes. And then you also face £5,000 to £10,000 fine as well. I mean, this is insane. It's crazy. It's insane. So, I mean, on the red list, there's countries like Portugal. So if you were to go to Portugal for a holiday and come back and you don't quarantine, you don't go to one of these quarantine hotels, you just go back to your home to quarantine if you want, 10 years in prison for that. Really? I mean, it's almost like they don't want us to travel in planes. It's almost like international travel is very soon going to be the pursuit of the rich and wealthy and nobody else. What if you can afford to go to Portugal? You're working class. You can afford to go to Portugal for your annual one holiday a year, 1 week in Portugal. But your holiday costs less than the amount you have to pay to stay in the COVID hotel, and also you can't afford to have 10 days off when you get back from your holiday. What's going on? It's almost like they don't want people travelling. And then it was also mentioned about vaccines for children by the end of the year. Injecting our kids. It's just scary. It's just worrying. It's worrying that there's all of this control coming and social credit, and the majority of the population will have to demonstrate this and demonstrate that, and while the elite are travelling around the world still in their private jets. So for me, for rules for thee but not for me. That's the whole idea behind this, really. So it's going to be about climate next, and it's going to be about reducing all these emissions and everything else. So everybody, you can no longer travel around the world. You can't go on holiday because it's causing too much pollution and everything else. We can. Us policymakers, us people at the top of the pyramid, we can, because we're doing a favour to you. We're going around telling everybody about it. But you can't. Make sure you carry your passport with you. That's what's happening. And so why? But why is that happening? This is something that I've really struggled with. I've really wrestled with in my mind. What is the reason? And I've thrown about different scenarios. And one of the things that I believe that is happening now is I think that the elite actually feel, and this journey I've taken you through about learning about false flags and the recipe for false flags and how different false flag events have evolved over recent times and the frequency of them. I think that the elite are now very worried that they're losing control of this game that has been weighted on to their side for a long time. I think they feel like they're losing control now because of the free flow of information that people have. You can instantly cross-check what a politician says. You can instantly cross-check what the mainstream media has just said. You can instantly do it and form your own opinion. You can call somebody. If they say that there's been an attack over there, wherever, you can literally pick up the phone, free. Pick up your phone or even video call. What's going on? Are you okay? What's going on there? Oh, no, nothing's happened here. So you can no longer fabricate stories or narratives to keep the people in control. It doesn't work anymore. So I think they feel that they're losing control. Brexit was never meant to happen. But they lost control and it happened. Trump was never meant to happen. But they lost control and it happened. Trump was never meant to get so much support in the last election, but it happened and they lost control. So So that's what this is. In my opinion, that's what this is all about. It's about they're saying the plebs no longer believe our stories. It's like medieval times. That one of the worst things that could happen to the kings of the medieval world was when the regular man or regular woman began to learn to read and write, because they could send letters, they could read something, they could read a letter, they could communicate, they could do it. That was bad for them. It's the same. This is the same sort of thing. We were never meant to have this much information. That was supposed to be held by the people in power only, and now everybody's got it. So they're starting to worry now. People just aren't believing it anymore. After the smear campaign of Trump and Brexit during the time period, what was supposed to happen, which has always worked, is people were supposed to turn on that story, on Brexit. They would turn their backs on Trump, but they didn't. They didn't. They went for it more because they were like, you're trying to trick me. So I believe that the whole COVID thing now is an imposition of control exercise. They're tightening up. They're tightening up the screws. They're kind of tightening up those leashes. It's like we're all on dog leashes, and we just keep breaking free. We're just a bit too strong. So they've gone out and they've bought stronger chains. That's what it is. That's what's going on at the moment. They're going to do it through laws. They're going to pass laws that are going to stop people from living their life day to day as they would normally. So that if anybody falls out of line and anybody starts questioning something, they can use those laws to affect the outcome as they want. And any COVID law that's passed now, and just talking about the UK, I'm not too sure about laws that are getting passed in the US, but any COVID law that gets passed will be here with us long after COVID's gone. They're just tightening up the ship. That's all they're doing. They're just tightening things up. And I think that I actually think they've looked at China. A lot of the elite have looked at China as an example of like, okay, so that social credit system in China works a dream. It works a dream because it's soft control. It's telling people that they need to have a passport to be able to go and do things. So it's soft control. It's compliance. It's so people will say it's like the people wearing who are like pro wearing masks. Wear a mask when you go and exercise outdoors. Wear a mask when you do this. It's compliance because it's planting in their mind that they're doing the right thing. And so they do it, and it's the same with the passport. Well, I'm doing my bit. I'm doing my bit for this crisis that I've been told is happening. And I'm doing my bit. And so I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to carry this passport and I'm going to show people everywhere. And that's it. But then as soon as you start talking out of line, well, your bank's just been closed. Yeah, but you can't just close my bank. Yeah, we can because we passed a load of laws that were for COVID, but really they work for this. So you've no longer got any bank. We've taken your money. And why should the ruling class be scared of a revolt or an uprising from us, from the general population of the world? Why? Why should they worry about it? Well, they shouldn't. If everything's above board and there's nothing to worry about and everything's legitimate and they've got our best interests at heart, they shouldn't have to worry about an uprising. The fact they do appears like a state of paranoia. The cages around the Capitol Hill, staying in your house, not allowed to leave your house, not allowed to see people. It's like paranoia. They believe that there's something going on, and the only reason is because they know that people aren't swallowing what they're giving them anymore, what they're feeding them, and people are seeing what's going on. And that's what this is all about. That's what this whole thing's about. It smacks of desperation. It smacks that they're coming to the end of their years of glory, their time of being in control of everything. They're coming to the end. It's the end of their reign. And this is their last attempt to just hold on to control. So is COVID-19 the virus real? Absolutely. Is it a false flag? I think there's a high probability that it's a false flag. Simply because things don't add up at all. It's not proportionate to what's going on. And I think that false flags are gonna become more and more, or are becoming more prevalent. I think the optics are really important these days to back up the false flag. So that's why you get the politicians exaggerating. It's very, very important these days for them to try and keep hold of that narrative, because people aren't being fooled anymore. Rely on your instinct. You've been, as an animal, you've been given this instinct to judge things and to know what's real and what's not real, and what's being manipulated and what's not, what doesn't make sense and what does make sense. That instinct is in us all. It's in us, and it was put there. Well, it was evolved to be able to make judgments and say, well, I believe this and I don't believe this, or, oh, come on, that's a load of rubbish. But whenever anybody does that now, they're squashed. You can't say that. You can't say that's rubbish. We've told you it's not rubbish. It can't be rubbish. Just use your instincts, please. Start to just have some conviction in what you think. Don't allow other people to tell you that something's one way. Especially when they say it's a deadly virus, it's a horrendous virus, this is the worst pandemic ever. And then you look at the actual survival rate is plus 99%. Like just do your own research and just trust yourself, trust your God-given instinct. That's all I'm asking. And we'll be all right. We'll be all right. We'll come out the other end. Don't worry. Because my thing, the ruling class, the elite, they think they've got it sewn up now. They haven't. They've got no idea. Because we're all so much stronger together. And so eventually we'll allow them to tie themselves in knots and to run around, but they'll be taught a lesson eventually. This won't be forever. I'm an optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. So the people who say, I'm scared, I don't know this can't be, don't worry. We'll get out of this. We'll all come out of this together, and we'll all be a lot better for it. Sometimes you have to go through a bit of pain to purge a disease that the elite above us is. So let me know what you think. What do you think about COVID-19? Is it a false flag? Whether you do or not, let me know. Maybe you think, let me know. Tell me I'm crazy. Let me know what your experiences are. What are your instincts telling you? What do you think? Is it a false flag? Is it a real thing, or is there something more to it? Is there something more to the story that this whole thing is being used for? Thank you very much. So please, as I said before, please subscribe if you haven't already. Like if you like the video, and just leave a comment. Let me know. Whatever. Speak to me. I like nothing more than speaking to people who watch my videos. So I'll be more than happy to engage in some conversation. But I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And that's it from me for this week. Keep yourself safe. Remember to just question everything and make your own judgments. Be your own person. Enjoy your family. Enjoy your friends. Make sure that you're still keeping sane. If you're struggling, get in touch with me. Get in touch with your friends and family. I can talk. I can talk for England, as you can see, watching this video, if you've got to this part. So really appreciate it, as always. You're really keeping me kind of optimistic about the future, that people are interested in hearing what I'm saying. So because I do think that having these discussions and talking about it and hearing other people's opinions is really, really helpful to get into the truth of what's going on in the world. So thank you very much. Next time, grab yourself a drink, come and sit down, and let's talk. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.